Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Leary and this is X Job Downloaded, and today I'm going to interview Rebecca Walker. Now, Rebecca is a former police officer and now a historian, tour guide, historical researcher. Let's put it this way, you've put your time to good use, haven't you?
It's funny, before I retired, somebody who'd got to retirement before me said to me, when you retire, you'll wonder how you found the time to go to work.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely spot on. Yeah, I've almost got, I say too much to do, if you like, but it's of my own making.
Yeah, do you know what? If you've got an active mind, we're all guilty of it. I've got an active mind and I can't sit still. It drives my wife absolutely nuts because I'd rather sit and research and work than I would watch rubbish television. But where did it all begin for Rebecca Walker? What is Rebecca Walker all about? Where were you born? And how did you get to your journey in the police service?
Okay, well, I was brought up in a little place called Hatch End, and I always say, well, it's Pinner-Harrow because nobody has ever heard of Hatch End. But I contrived to be born in Hertfordshire, mainly because when my mum went into labour, Dad went to the end of the drive and turned left instead of right. And we were very close to the Hertfordshire border. So I ended up being born in Watford a few years ago now. It's funny, I moved house down to Sussex about three and a half years ago. And when I moved, I found an essay that I'd written probably when I was about 11 or 12 about what do you want to do when you grow up. And I'd actually written in there that I was interested in the law. And I've known in later years I've been interested in the law. I didn't realise it started that early. I'd forgotten. And that either I wanted to go into the police or to be a lawyer. But I went probably quite a circuitous route to it, I would think. I didn't actually join the police until the month before my 30th birthday. I was quite a late joiner. I'd done other things. I'd done A-levels. I'd gone on to university. Faffed around for a bit, not really knowing quite what I wanted to do. I did have a stint for a few years as working in admin at the Royal Ballet School.
Oh,
which
lovely.
Is probably a bit left field, very, very different. And it was, just to date it a little bit, it was when Darcy Bussell was a student there.
Wow, I've seen her dance.
Long ago. That's how long ago. And then I did a stint in corporate investigations, supporting investigations, and then joined Sussex Police in 1993.
Oh, okay. I love ballet. I mean, it sounds really... Anybody that knows me well think, hold on, this bald-headed bloke who looks like an extra out of a gangster film. But I do. I absolutely love the Royal Ballet. I think it's the best spectacle I've ever seen. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But what was the actual inspiration to join Sussex Police?
I'd been doing some temporary work. I'd left the Royal Ballet School. I worked for a little while in corporate investigations. I'd ended up going off and doing some temporary work for a private investigation firm. And I thought, well, now's probably the time because I'm looking at these people going out who had background in Royal Military Police or in the police itself and had retired. And I thought, actually, I could do that.
Cool.
So that was really what prompted my application. And I lived in Sussex at the time, so it made sense to stay local.
And where did you go to?
Started off, it was when they were still doing like the block learning, so it wasn't done in-house. So you go down to Lewes for your first, I think, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you get sworn in. You get your uniform and your warrant card and your ID card, do a little bit about the law, and then you were unleashed on your division for, I think it was a week or 2 weeks, which, knowing nothing, you knew nothing, but you were wearing the uniform. So I remember being out with I think they put you out with various departments. So I was out with the traffic officer one day. We went to a bit of a prang in Crawley, and I'm stood there thinking, not quite sure what I'm supposed to do here. And somebody walks up to me to ask me something. I'm like, oh, please don't ask me anything vaguely important. basically they'd found some keys. So even for that, I had to kind of get the traffic guy over and say, what do we do with this? Because you were unleashed with not very much knowledge at that point. But then you went off to Ashford Police Training Centre, which is now, I think, some sort of adventure centre for scouts and what have you. It wasn't like that in my day. So you did, I think it was 3 months there, went back to division, went back to your force for a month, and then went back to Ashford for a month. Right.
Yeah, I went to Ashford. Yeah. And there are lots of Sussex officers there. So what was your first posting though? Where did you go to as a probationer?
Haywards Heath, or Mid-Sussex as it was called then. I was at Haywards Heath. So very much a mix of rural, and it's obviously got the town in it. So it's a real mixture, Haywards Heath. And I actually really liked it there, but we were a really small, I mean, people complain today about, single crewing and we don't have enough people. My section, there were 5 or 6 of us on it.
Wow.
And obviously if people took, I mean, this is 1993, 1994.
Yep.
So, once I was allowed to go out on my own, you'd be out there in the fields and lanes driving around on your own, dealing with things with really patchy radio reception. You could not guarantee your radio would always work. And I think the police for me was a great education in learning the ability to being able to talk about anything for a long length of time. So if you're standing there waiting for another unit to come, you do develop the ability just to chat away, to keep somebody distracted from fighting you perhaps or running away.
But that is the ability of a police officer. The level of communication is such that whether they were a director or head of a bank or whatever it is, or somebody sleeping rough, you had that ability to communicate at the right level.
Yes,
I'm not sure that still sits, but anyway, how did you find that though? You've gone in as a 30-year-old. You're an adult compared to some of the people that have joined. They're quite, some, and I was one of them. I was 21, quite immature. How did you find that?
I think I perhaps fell on my feet a bit with that, because the group that I joined with in Sussex, so there were only 13 of us. We were quite a small intake, and mostly it was people who'd done other things. So they were that little bit older. I mean, one of the people who joined with me, she was a rejoiner. She'd been in Sussex. She'd had to leave, as were the rules, when she became pregnant.
Yeah.
She had a history of being a CID officer, so she came back. She had to rejoin and go through it all again. And I think she was a little bit older than I was. So we did have quite a grounded group. Ashford was probably different, because you did again experience a whole range of people from different forces of different ages. But again, I think it was fairly dominated by people who'd been other places, done other things, or a little bit older. Because I do remember one day when I went back for the second lot of Ashford indoctrination, it was just at the time when the police service was going a bit more towards sitting around in a circle and talking about things rather than your chalk and talk way of teaching. And we went into class one morning before the trainers arrived, and a chap who was ex-army from Thames Valley Police, he just said, "I've had enough of this, sitting around like this." And so all of us got our chairs into order. So we all sat as though we were in a classroom.
Yep.
And the trainers walked in and looked a bit, we don't really know what's going on here. And as was used to be the way at Ashford, if anybody wanted to say anything, they put their hand up in class, and then we stood up when we were given permission to speak, and then sat down again.
Yep.
And there was that little bit of a craving for the old, we're half doing the discipline because you salute senior officers when you see them around the campus. But then in the classroom, it's all kind of, let's just sit and talk about
Facilitation.
Yes, very much so. Which sometimes doesn't sit easily when, you need to know the law.
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah,
one of the things I always used to say to people when they joined was make sure you know your powers.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing, knowing your powers.
And do you not find it frustrating now? I don't like auditors. I don't like these people that go around and audit. They do the social, stand outside a police station and wind up the coppers. But I just wish that when I saw an inspector the other day where a person's there taking a video outside of a police station, and the inspector walks out and says, "You can't do that." Well, why can't I do that? Well, there's no law that says you can't do that. There's a way of negotiating it, but this inspector didn't know their power, and I just thought this is a sad indictment because we knew, and even now I know my definitions verbatim.
Oh yeah, many a happy hour learning definitions have been tested on them on the Monday morning when you went back to Ashford every week.
Well, and if you wanted to become an actor, you could do it by learning as a police officer because you learn your lines. That's how it was. Yeah. When you've gone to Haywards Heath, how long did you serve there?
I was there probably for about 18 months, coming up 2 years. I went off then to be a beat officer at Crawley. So I looked after largely the northwest corner of Crawley. So I was the main contact for Langley Green, which has a predominantly Asian population. It still does. It did then. But I also looked after Ifield and West Green. So it was very different from Haywards Heath in terms of concentration of people, the difference in culture and that sort of thing. But I love Crawley, absolutely love Crawley. If you ask me my favourite posting, I'd say it was Crawley.
Well, and of course it's got Gatwick Airport there.
Yes, that was my final posting at Gatwick because that's a little division all on its own.
Wow. And I'll tell you, my other fact about Crawley is that Robert Smith from The Cure was from Crawley.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another famed family are the Minters. You remember the Boxers?
Boxers, Alan Minter, yeah.
Yeah, the Minter family, a Crawley family.
Are they? Wow. Yeah. So you've done Crawley, and you've got. I suppose there's a lot of people there that would have been working at the airport because it would have been a massive draw, and probably still is.
That's right, and they were still building bits of Crawley at the time. There's a spot called Maidenbower, and I used to absolutely dread being sent anywhere off my beat, particularly Maidenbower, because they were still building it. And I remember being sent to an audible alarm in Maidenbower one day, and the control room said, "We can't really help you with where it is because the street that allegedly it's on, it's not on our map, so we don't actually really know where it is." And I remember going up there and winding the windows down on the police car and just listening for this thing. So they were still building bits of Crawley, and quite a few aircrew living there, and lots of people who, when Crawley was a new town in I think the 1950s, had come down from South London. So there were still those connections with London, strong London connections for many people.
Direct route into London from there on the train as well, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, how long did you carry out that role?
Oh, I think it was coming up 3 years when I left Crawley to go to somewhere radically different. I was still doing beat work, but I went to Forest Row, which is just outside East Grinstead.
Oh, okay.
Very much a rural beat. You've got the Ashdown Forest there.
Yeah.
Very alternative in many ways. You have the Rudolf Steiner School, which has a particular form of education for children. You have the Scientologist School there as well. Radically different again from Crawley.
I saw somebody went to tried to do some filming outside that school, the Scientology school, and they got short shrift. I was watching something recently. Did you do your time as a uniform officer? Because you were a police search advisor as well, weren't you?
Yeah, I started in police search I think I did the course in 1995, and I kept that ticket all the way through my service, which I'm particularly proud of. And I started off as a search officer, but at that time they were called counter-terrorist search officers.
Yeah.
Predominantly because there'd been the Brighton bomb down at Brighton Conservative Party conference back in the 1980s. Yeah. Search had really come into being at that point on the UK mainland. There was search activities in Northern Ireland. They decided really we need to start applying some of the techniques from Northern Ireland in this country. So they set up the Police National Search Centre, which was at Bramshill, I think. It might have started actually at Chattenden Barracks with the Royal Engineers. And then I went on the course at Bramshill when I worked my way up to police search advisor. So I did the legwork, because you have to do searches first of all. You have to be a search officer before you can then progress to being the police search advisor. So, I mean, I did a huge variety of searches down in Sussex from murder scenes. I was on the team for a little while for the Sarah Payne inquiry back in 2000. party political conferences were still going on, Operation Otter, so got deployed on those.
And how long does it take to get qualified as a pulser or a search advisor?
You start off as your search officer, so a specialist search officer, and you do a week's course with the Police National Search Centre where you're trained by a mixture of pulsers and Royal Engineers.
Right.
Because a big element of the course is still around bombs.
Yeah.
So you look at bombs, missing person and crime searches. And the next stage on, when you've been a search officer, is to go to the pulsar course. And when I did it, it was a 4-week course. So you spent 3 weeks on crime and counter-terrorism and a week on missing people.
And people don't realise the depths or how much work takes place when they carry out, even searching a sterile cell, because we used to do that on a regular basis. When I was a custody manager, we'd have the cell searched. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work goes in. It doesn't. People don't just walk in and say, "Oh yeah, look, there's a untidy office," and walk out half an hour later. It could take a few days to search.
Oh, so I know, and I wish more senior officers understood that. I think they think it just happens by magic, but you have to do, certainly in the planning stage. You're going along. You're looking at the environment you have. You're identifying risks. So if you're in an older building, something like asbestos, is that present? How are we going to get round searching those areas? What access is like for people, and then actually looking at the tools you're going to do the job with, whether it's using dogs or explosive swabbing or manual search or endoscopes and that sort of thing. So you learn a vast amount on that course. You really do. Oh,
absolutely. It's interesting that you say about the senior management, because my argument as a detective, people always thought that once you'd done the arrest, the whole job, that was it. They didn't realise that there was a search team, certainly on major crime, and the job has only just begun when someone's been charged or been arrested, and then you're up against the clock.
Yes, that's right.
Did you ever undertake any mutual aid work?
Yes, one of the best searches I ever went on. It's one of those ones. It was before the days of camera phones, and I wish now I'd taken a camera with me. But we went on mutual aid to Surrey for the Epsom Derby.
Right.
And it was shortly after the Grand National. I think the Grand National, the course had been evacuated because somebody had phoned in a bomb threat.
Yep.
So they decided to search the grandstand areas and the course. And it was a night search. And I'm not sure. I mean, today Surrey and Sussex worked together very much, but there were two separate forces then. I'm not sure if Surrey thought, right, we'll give Sussex the Queen's suite of rooms, because then if something goes wrong, we can blame Sussex for it. But we had the Queen's suite together with other areas. So we got the bit where, it's the King's suite now, the bit where the Queen used to stand on the balcony.
Yes.
There's a suite of rooms behind there. And we got to search that room, the Queen's toilet, the Queen's kitchen and all that sort of thing. And a vivid memory for me, because my parents were really into horse racing. They loved horses. And a vivid memory for me was going in there, and there's a book that sits on the table on the side, and it goes back as early as photography started, I think, and it's a photograph of every Derby winner with the jockey, and it's signed by the jockey, the trainer, and the owner. Each picture for each.
Oh wow!
And you think it just sits on the side, or it was sitting on the side in that room, and you think, how is this still here?
Yeah.
So that was a good search. And we went up to Manchester for the Commonwealth Games as well.
Right.
On the pre-search and seal for that. So we did get to go various places. Yeah.
Yeah, lucky.
I think they do it a bit more now than we did, but those were the two that stick in my mind.
Well, I worked on a murder of a young lady by the name of Danielle Jones, and I just remember there was a huge amount of mutual aid from the search perspective. But
I think I heard a talk from the Pulsar for Daniel Jones, actually, because we had to re-license. To stay in license, you had to go back and re-license. And also on the initial course, you had an awful lot of good talks from Pulsars. So we had, I'm fairly certain we had the Daniel Jones Pulsar come and talk to us.
Brilliant lady called Heather Alston was a Pulsar on that.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, a phenomenal job, and the amount of work that took place.
Yeah.
Months, 11 months of searching, Never ever found her body. Very sad. But you say about cameras, when the plane crashed here in Essex, the Korean airliner, I carry a camera everywhere, and at that time it was a film, and I've got pictures of the crash site. It's sad, but we talk about history, and we'll come into that. But that's what we build history from. It's and
I think the one thing I wish I'd done more of, when we went to Manchester on the Commonwealth Games, I took a little disposable camera with me, but I just wish, obviously staying within the rules, but I wish I'd taken the camera with me more. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think these days the modern way of people taking photographs of dead bodies on their phones and things like that, that's unforgivable.
That is,
but
absolutely.
To capture historic moments away from that, I think that, and we're lucky as police officers, we're often at the forefront of historical moments.
And you become a bit, I say blasé about it. We used to, when I transferred to the city, the types of searches there were really different from the types I'd had in Sussex. So I was involved in Margaret Thatcher's funeral, the Jubilee searches, was involved in some of the planning for the Queen's lying in state, and the sort of the run up to that. And you get access. It's like access all areas almost. I've been up. If you go up into St Paul's actually has 2 domes, and you can walk around within the 2 domes. You probably wouldn't want to because you disturb a lot of cobwebs and spiders. But I've been up in areas, buildings like that, and the Mansion House and the Guildhall. You don't get access to if you're just a member of the public or there for other reasons.
And people would pay money to do those additional tours.
I know. Yeah, I know.
And but what they can't take away your memories of doing those, and the sights and sounds and the smells of the things that you've done.
Yeah, that's very true.
What year did you transfer to the city?
2004.
And what was the motivation to transfer up?
At the time, I was qualified to sergeant, and Sussex were desperate for custody sergeants, and they'd gone to centralised custody. So instead of kind of being sensible about it and saying, well, okay, you live 5 miles away from this custody centre, we'll post you there. They were looking at, I don't know, trips across the county to Eastbourne or down to Brighton. And I just thought, do I really want to do that? And at the time, a lot of people were transferring up to London, mainly to the Met, which I never really fancied. But quite a few Sussex officers had gone to the City of London Police. So I met with somebody there that I'd known for ages and had a chat with him, and ended up putting in to apply to the city because I had some family issues at the time. So thinking that I'd be spending hours driving to Eastbourne and doing a 10, 12-hour shift in custody before driving home, and then having to go off with sort of caring issues. It was just like, no, I need to have a plan B now, which I need to activate. So so I transferred up to the city, which is very different from a county force.
Yes. Yeah, it's very, very different. We used to take the mickey out of them when we were at Ashford, but
can't think why.
But it's great, and I've got some lovely friends from there. Did you get promoted to go to the city?
I ended up I went qualified to sergeant because I just missed their process.
Right.
But then did get promoted to substantive sergeant I was on division. So I was at Bishopsgate, which I know it's quite an old station now. It was built in the late 1930s, and bits of it are falling to pieces. Bits of it are not quite as good as they could be, put it that way. But I love working at Bishopsgate. Yeah. There's a lot of history at Bishopsgate. And I was custody. I did quite a lot of time doing custody sergeant, so I was on division there.
Right. It's a great area, and from a historical perspective, it's probably that area is the jewel in London's crown. That square mile. Yeah. I accept that you've got the other parts, your Buckingham Palaces and all that, but actually, for traditional history, the guilds and all the things that go on there, there's so much pageantry. The HAC. You walk another half a mile and you're in Jack the Ripper's. In fact, part of Jack the Ripper was in the City of London, wasn't it? So it's
Mitre Square.
Mitre Square, and then you've got the city. You've got the Tower of London, and all the lovely things around there.
Yeah, very much the historic heart of London, the city is.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Loads of history.
And you've got your Freeman's thing on the back behind you. Is it?
I have, yeah. I got the Freedom. I think it was in 2009 or 2010, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
lovely.
And that was through doing a lot of work with the corporation on things like searches for state banquets and involvement with them, planning for the big events, big ceremonials. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah,
you mentioned some of the iconic events that you've been involved in policing, and I suppose that the death of Her Majesty was probably right up there when it came to, because I'm a royalist. Make no mistake that I am absolutely. I was in Australia when she passed away, and I was very, very sad, and I spent a lot of time for various reasons in Buckingham Palace. But what was the highlight for you as a search advisor? What was the highlight for you?
Gosh, that's a really tricky one. I suppose more than just one specific event. It's rather more general. I think for me was being involved in things like the big state occasions. So I remember, irrespective of what people think about Margaret Thatcher, the city was a very sombre place on the day of the funeral. And I know a Pulsar colleague, he was down at St Paul's, and he said standing there doing the search arches with that bell tolling, he said it really was, very, very sobering.
Yeah.
But I think if I had to pick memories out, it would be being involved in the big state occasions. I was also the Pulsar for an event called Chogham a few years ago, which is the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting.
Oh, right, yeah.
It was quite funny because the Met didn't tell me this till afterwards. They said that there was a big reception held up at the Sky Garden at the top of that, the walkie-talkie in Fenchurch Street, Sky Garden. And I think the Met said, this was the one that kind of worried us a little bit because it's a multi-occupancy building. And I ended up as the Pulsar for it. So that was a particularly memorable because you just had all of the heads of the Commonwealth there, together with their partners accompanied them, their foreign secretaries there. The Prime Minister was there, who was Theresa May at the time. I think Boris Johnson put in an appearance. I think he was Foreign Secretary. And yeah, huge responsibility. That's probably the standout one, really, for responsibility.
But you think about it, and we go back to our privilege, if you like. You've seen people that most people only ever see on the television.
Yeah,
you've encountered these people, and I don't take that for granted. Margaret Thatcher's funeral is a big thing because she laid in state, if I remember rightly, at the House of Parliament. Then she laid in St Mary's Undercroft, then taken to the RAF Church, which is Church St Clement Dane, and then they took her on a gun carriage from there to St Paul's Cathedral, and the guard that was in charge of the overall military aspect is a man by the name of Billy Motts, who was a garrison sergeant major for London District.
Yeah.
And he now lives in Tennessee. He runs a military academy in Tennessee, and a formidable person. I've had the honour of meeting him a couple of times. And you look at all the state occasions, he was the person that was behind the Trooping in the Colour, for instance. So nobody does it. Pageantry in the UK, nobody does it better in the world. Nobody. And I rue the day that somebody tries to stop all these things from taking place.
Yeah, we do spectacle really well. And that was an interesting part of being a Pulsar for those sorts of things, because you did have, you went to planning meetings and the military were there, and you got a chance to see aspects of other people's planning, other organisations' planning as well.
But do you think, the public at large wouldn't understand how much work goes into this? All they see is people pulling up drain covers, and they don't understand. But sometimes there's conflict between the public, building owners and things like that, and the police, because they don't understand the significance of what's taking place. Was that something that you ever encountered?
I'd say largely people were really good. And certainly when I went to the Sky Garden, that, given all the issues that there could have been, our relationship was superb. They sort of really went out of their way to help me, and can't really thank them enough for that, because that was a difficult job. I think I've had one event where the Queen was going somewhere in the city, and I mean, the security manager was very much on side, but he did say to, I think it was the Bronze, City Bronze, I didn't think it'd take this long. It's like, well, it's actually really quite a big venue. So, yeah. And by the time you put, dogs through it and then people are searching it and you're doing all your paperwork, because obviously paperwork is a huge thing to know who went where when, and that we've actually managed to do it all.
Yeah.
And we were still working off paper, in the same way when I first did custody in the city, we were still working on paper custody records. So, a vast amount of paperwork.
Were you there during 7/7 in the city?
Yes, I was on late turn at Bishopsgate, but trying to get in for late turn was the challenge because I still lived out in Harrow.
Right.
And I popped out shopping and I went back home and my dad was there and he said, oh, there's been this thing happening in London. This was about 9:30 in the morning. And I went off for late turn and got to the railway station. They said there are no trains. So I actually walked from there to Wembley, which is a fair way.
Yeah.
And they just started to run the buses again. So I managed to jump on a bus at Wembley and I got as far as the west side of Paddington Green. And they said, we're not allowed in, we can't go any further. So I walked from Paddington Green to the city, which was really bizarre because I kept coming up against cordons, so I kept getting knocked off course and I know London pretty well, so I was finding my way around. But I was one of very, very, very few people walking towards central London. Yeah. Everybody else was walking out. It was really odd. It was like, mass evacuation of London. Here am I going that way towards what's going on.
And we say, don't we, officers run towards trouble and danger, and I think that's lost as well on the public because they seem to forget that they still have to maintain their job, wherever that job may be. Yeah.
Yeah, and I managed eventually to get to Bishopsgate. I think it was 4:30.
Wow.
And then after that, we spent several days on cordons down at Aldgate while everything was being processed. And again, a funny thing about the city, because people who work in the city tend to have worked there for years, you get people coming up to you at the cordon saying, well, I need to go that way through there because that's how I get to work. Yeah. And we're like, well, you can't today. Well, I don't know any other way. So you'd be busy directing people who for like the past 20 years have gone that way to work and suddenly.
Yeah, people don't like change.
No.
Did you get involved in any of the investigation or the search stuff on that?
No, not for that one.
No,
not for that one. Purely uniform, standing on cordons for that. Which that had its moments because again people think, oh, you're just standing on a cordon. But I remember I was a sergeant at the time, and one of the PCs calling me over and saying, oh, these people they're looking for somebody who and this was probably about 3 days afterwards.
Heartbreaking.
They're looking for someone. And I don't quite know what to tell them to do. So I went across to chat to them, and they were holding this photograph of this young lady they were looking for, who's a family member. And all I could say to them was, have you spoken to Casualty Bureau? You need to phone. And they said, we've done that. We've been to the hospital. She's not there. She's not there. She's not there. And I said, well, you need to speak to Casualty Bureau. Again, if you've not spoken to them, you need to phone them up and give them the details, and they will keep in touch with you. And I think sometimes police officers go to jobs and you walk away and you've forgotten all about it. But that one, I can remember in the days after that, as the papers started to publish photographs of those who'd been killed, looking every day at the pictures being published to see if she was there. And one day she was, with the same photograph that they presented to me at the cordon, and you just think, and that was how many years ago? Yeah, and I've not forgotten that one. No. And there's stuff you don't forget. There are people who stay with you and jobs that stay with you.
Yeah, there are, and the good and the bad, and you just think. Yeah. I interviewed Andy Heyman, who was the deputy commissioner at the time, and he was sitting in his office when it all happened, and his deputy walks in and said, "There's a bomb," and it was like, "Well, what do we do now?" Because one bomb we could cope with, but when there's a series of them, I say cope with. But and then he went to a briefing, and a father stood up and said that his son had got off of the tube after the bomb, and then got on the bus at Tavistock Square. And these things, look, we are human.
Yeah,
we maintain,
exactly.
you know, the press would have it that we're not. And for every bad officer, there is 136.4 thousand that aren't. You know, there's a very small minority of people that let us down. I still see us as being part of the family, and we still maintain our feelings around the work that we under. We had a gallows humour and we had banter, but that didn't stop us from carrying out a professional job.
No, exactly. You have what I call police mode. You go into police mode.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
Which, you know, may not necessarily be good for us long term, but you do go into police mode because, you know, who else is going to help people? You know, when you go to certain jobs like that, who else is going to do anything? You know, it's down to us.
That's
isn't
us.
It?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's down to us.
So you progress through and you get to 2020.
Yep.
26 years and 11 months later, you decide that you're going to put your ticket in. But and what was the motivation to leave?
I'd always said I'd look at going when I got to 25 years.
Right.
And I kind of drifted on because, of course, 2020 was the year of COVID.
Yep.
So it was all, you know, it was all mixed up at that point. At that point, I was working predominantly in an office job. I was acting as police liaison on the Forces Accommodation programme, and I'd been doing that a little while. But I'd always been somebody who had other interests. So I'd done my tour guiding courses. The city had kind of reignited an interest in history. And one of the projects I got involved with the accommodation programme was the relocation of the City Police Museum to the Guildhall. So I was starting to get really interested in history again. I do family history as well. And it was the thought that, you know, I've gone over the 25 years that I said I'd go. And I really missed doing uniform patrol, I suppose. I missed doing uniform stuff, but physically I couldn't do it anymore for various reasons. And I just decided it was time to go off and do other things. So I kind of did everything in one go. I retired and I moved house at the same time, which in the era of COVID was not really that easy.
Torturous.
It was. It was torturous.
And how did you prepare yourself to do the tour guiding stuff, and what does that look like? If I wanted to do it today, are you a blue badge or?
No, blue badge takes a few years and is very expensive. But a friend of a friend had done the Clerkenwell and Islington guiding course, which I think today they just call themselves Islington Guides. And he'd said, if you want to go on a course that doesn't just teach you the history of the area, but gives you the guiding techniques, I found this one really good. So I went on the Islington course, and indeed it is an absolutely excellent course, which was accredited at that time by the University of Westminster.
Oh, right.
So you ended up getting a diploma when you finished your course. And so you go one evening a week, you do, I think it's two Saturdays a month. So you do inputs from lecturers on the evenings where you learn about the history of the area. You do presentations, and then you go out and you prepare your stops, as they call them, and then you gradually build up to being able to, for the exam walk, to deliver 12 stops. So you could deliver any one that you're asked to do. So I did that course initially, and then I think it was a couple of years later, because a lot of my family on my father's side come from the Camden area.
Right.
I did the Camden course.
Oh, fantastic.
So now I'm leading a group next week, actually. So now I develop my own walks, design those, and then go out and deliver them.
Well, I don't hold this against me, but I'm a failed mason. All right.
Okay.
And Clerkenwell used to be the Masonic Centre. It was Pitney Bowes had it, and then I think it was the Magistrates Court before that, and then Pitney Bowes had it. Then it became a Masonic Centre. Well, I worked on the murder of a man by the name of Raphael Conrad Chapchick, who was executed out in Epping Forest. And we had suspects who've never been charged, but we had some film. They'd videoed themselves. And opposite Clerkenwell Masonic Centre, there was a nightclub that used to be on the very corner of or a bar and nightclub, and I recognised it from this video. And they'd all been in there. All these suspects had been in there.
Oh,
so I know, and because you've got Hatton Garden down the road,
right.
and all the fantastic sites there, the meat market, and it's which I understand is moving. It
is, yeah. They've decided at long last that it'll be shipped out. So they're having the new Museum of London is taking over some of the buildings.
Oh, is it? Because I mean, Billingsgate's going as well, as I understand it, but the original Billingsgate is at Lower Thames Street, just down on the way from the Tower of London into the city.
They moved out to East London a while ago.
Yeah, that's right, out to Canary Wharf, and that's going now, and I assume that will become buildings. So how often do you go out on tours?
Oh, it's really ad hoc. I kind of, I do it fairly often locally during the summer months, so I'm part of some heritage tours in the local area, which they're all free tours. I do it to keep my skills up, so I'll go out at least once a month during the summer. And then it's very, very kind of ad hoc. So we've been approached about a walk for next week, which we're doing. And then I hope to do a little bit more this summer because I've got a couple of walks that need an airing, if you like. I've not done them for a little while. So they'll be in the Clerkenwell area and the City of London, because the very first walk that I designed was one on the history of the city police and law and order in the city. So before COVID, used to do really quite a good trade with usually American criminology students who would come over and want a tour. And the inevitable question, which often happened even before the end of the war, could be, why don't you carry guns? That was always asked. You could put money on that one. Why don't you carry guns over here?
Oh, I know. I haven't got long enough to explain why, but yeah, we'd be shooting each other instead of stabbing each other. But
yes, yeah.
Because you're involved you like police history, don't you? That's one of your things. Are you involved in the Police History Society as well? Is that?
Yeah, I sit on the committee for the Police History Society, and it has. I mean, we're emailed things from time to time. It goes to the whole membership. Some really weird and niche questions, but inevitably there's a member that can answer them or that can help people. And it's a really good society. And yeah, you get a journal every year, and an article of mine was published in one of their journals a couple of years ago. So yeah, I sit on the committee for that and do a lot of my own work, mainly on the City of London Police, the history of the City of London Police.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating story in itself. And people don't. I'm glad that the city remain as an independent police service. I think if it got swallowed up by the Met, and I think the Met are looking at going into smaller sizes. But it is different. I mean, the City of London is different. There's different uniforms and different standards and different funding streams and everything else. But the history's quite strong. And the recruitment history used to have to be a certain height and be able to swim. Yeah. But because you had the Thames on the doorstep. So
I think that, at one point they had to be 6 foot to join the city police. But it seems to, like all these things, it will vary according to the recruitment pool. So if you have loads of people wanting to join the police, you can be a bit fussier about you. So you put the standards up a little bit higher. Yeah. But I don't know if this story is true, but the story that I've heard is because, the city streets are so narrow and thronged with people, you needed to be taller in order to be able to be seen above the heads of everybody.
That could well be true.
This paper that I did for the Police History Society journal talks about height, and it said that at the time the average Victorian male was 5'7".
Oh, right.
And the city wanted you to be 5'10" without your shoes on, and obviously you then put the helmet on top, so that's bringing you up to good 6 foot.
I had the pleasure of interviewing a guy called Mick Thwaites, who was a cadet in the city.
Okay.
And his story is very interesting because he was on duty when the Moorgate bomb went off, and because a police cadet was killed.
Yes. She had her leg amputated.
Yeah, that's right. She had a leg amputated. That's right. And he also was one of the first people at the Old Bailey bombing because the cadets were dispatched to it. And then he left and he went on a magical tour of the Far East, got caught up in Tehran during the 79 crisis, came back and joined Essex. But his story is very good. But what he also talks about was the Operation Countryman. And he was one of the first people on the scene for Daily Mirror. Was it the Daily Mirror murder? security guard. And he tells some really, really interesting stories with that. And but I mean, you pulled a face there, and this some of this will go out as like snippets. The problem we've got is that the police service is no different to any other walk of life.
No. So we're representative of the public we serve. I think.
Indeed.
Gets forgotten.
Indeed. And I think that of the 137,000 police officers, the handful that let us down are literally that, a handful. And if you took a town and put every, per person, 136,000 people in a town, there would be more criminality and more bad behaviour than the 136,000 police officers who work so bloody hard to keep us safe.
Yeah, I agree with you. But the trouble is the good work doesn't make the headlines necessarily, does it? It's the, the clickbait is in the bad headlines. But
and you're absolutely right. But the problem you've got is that the police do not put out the good news stories. They'll put out that such and such was sacked for gross misconduct, and they'll put all that out. But the good news stories get buried. They should be standing on top of St Paul's, shouting out, "This is what we've done this week. This is how we're, improving. How we do." But it's all very, very so passé. It's so low level. They don't project themselves very well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because obviously I joined the job in '93, and the forces get beaten up a lot about diversity.
Yes.
During my service, you're not good at diversity. You need to improve. You need to this. And then I'd go to places, and I remember speaking to somebody who was going to retire, and he went for a job doing security somewhere. And this would only have been about 10 years ago. And he asked about, have you got any women on the team? And the answer was, this isn't a suitable environment for women. And I thought, in the job, if you'd said that, you just wouldn't have said it. You'd have been hauled over the coals for it. And I think that there are lots of ways, because we repeatedly get beaten up about it, that we're actually better than some organisations outside, because we're very, very conscious of it.
Massively.
Very conscious of it.
And we've been that way. Certainly since 1990, we started pressing the changing things and getting things changed. And I feel for the modern officer. I think diversity, I think it's right that if you are gay, black, Chinese, whatever, you get a same, but get recruited on your merits. Get recruited because you are good at doing that job, or that you want to do that job for the right reasons. And I think sometimes quality, and this is very controversial, is sacrificed over diversity.
There's certainly a risk. There's certainly a risk from that.
I've worked with some brilliant people who come from diverse backgrounds. I've worked with some complete and utter idiots who come from, the heterosexual white standard. I've worked with,
exactly.
But I've also worked with some brilliant white individuals, and I've worked with some rubbish people that come from a diverse background. So it just doesn't. Oh God, the society is a melting pot.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
And history, which is what one of the things we're talking about, will bear that out. In 100 years' time, they will say, "God, they got that wrong, didn't they?" Or they got that right. It's
it is. Yeah, and you're always looking at history through different prisms,
Yeah, absolutely.
People will look at it in different ways, from different aspects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you know Ali Yule? Alison Yule?
I did a lot of work with Alison back in 2006. I worked in emergency planning for a while.
Oh, I see.
And we were looking at implementing all the recommendations from 7/7.
Yes.
So I worked with Alison on. I suggested we should do something like nominated survivor reception centres in the city, because it was so easy, and you have this, community that's willing to help. And did a lot of work with Alison around that time, around Casualty Bureau and survivor reception centres. Yeah,
I still speak to her to this day, because I met her at V. I was the bronze commander for crime, and she came on an attachment. I was a DCI over there, and she came on an attachment to the thing, but that's by the by. Before we conclude this interview, and this is something that is there anything you'd like to add, alter, or correct in relation to the statement that you've made today?
God, I don't think so. I mean, obviously the job has changed a lot since I joined it. I was very pleased I joined Sussex before I joined the city.
Right.
Because it gave me a totally. Each force gives you a different perspective on policing, very much so. There is a vast difference. So I was really pleased that I've been allowed, if you like, to have the two different perspectives on policing. But I think my solicitor would probably tell me to stop talking at this point. So,
well, I'd like to thank you for taking part in today. If there's anything I can do with the society, please let me know. These interviews are out there. If people want to use them, if just store them, do whatever they want to do to them. And I would, if there's anything I can get involved in, I would absolutely love it, because history is really good. Is part of my thing. Well, look, take care of yourself. Thank you so much for your time today. And I will speak to you again. And I hope that you've enjoyed your experience on this podcast.
Yeah, it's been really good. And if you contact anybody in the future and they're in two minds about doing it, let them listen to this, because I'll say it's been nice swinging the lamp. It's been really good.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
And you. Thanks a lot.
Take care. God bless.
Bye
Cheers.
now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.